nobody owns anything.
So online it's had a huge impact, but it's also had an impact on my life in the sense that I've gotten several death threats. I've had to ask the police here, am I endangered in any way because of this?
It was the World Economic Forum who first suggested Ida write her essay, which gets us into a somewhat uncomfortable area. How much of the conspiratorial chaos was brought on by the World Economic Forum itself. Take the title of Ida's essay.
World Economic Forum, the editor there gave it a very provocative title.
What was the title that they gave it?
They gave it the title, Welcome to 2030, I own nothing, I have no privacy and life has never been better. That title was not mine, and I'm sure the title in itself sort of made things explode because it's very provocative. This title is literally just one person working in their communication department who thought it was fun, and I thought it was fun too, so yeah.
To help publicise Ida's article, the World Economic Forum had released a Facebook video called 8 Predictions for the World in 2030. The first image in the video is a picture of a man smiling with the words, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy."
I thought it was actually coming out of the conspiracy theorists, that video, but it was the forum itself?
Yes. I can't help thinking that if Ida herself can't tell the difference between the World Economic Forum's own promotional video for her essay and a conspiracy theorist's video designed to make it seem terrifying, the World Economic Forum weren't doing a great job.
People say the World Economic Forum, it doesn't have power. Yes, it does. It has some of the most powerful people from all over the world.
This is Glenn Beck, the hugely influential right-wing talk show host, formerly of Fox News, and now with his own network, The Blaze. Glenn was so outraged by Thierry's book, he wrote his own book in response, called The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism. It became an instant New York Times bestseller.
We have seen this kind of arrogance before when you take government, philosophers, the arrogance of academia, if you will, then you mix in pharmaceutical companies, and you come up with horribly dangerous things because people convince themselves that they're right. They can build the right human. They just have to tweak people. They just have to control people. And that seems to be almost codified in you will have nothing and you'll like it.
That came from an essay written by Ida Auken, and you mentioned Ida Auken in your book. What can you remember about that?
Well, they have called this all a conspiracy theory, and they've wiped it from, but the internet is forever, dummies.
Glenn's right that you can't find Ida's essay on the World Economic Forum's website anymore. But according to Ida, it isn't for reasons of subterfuge, but because...
I asked them to take it down at some point when it got weaponized by a conspiracy theorist. We decided to take it offline because it wasn't bringing anything good for the world, or for me, or for the forum.
I own my land. I own my car. I own things. Our whole society is built on ownership. It's what drove America for a long time before we became insane.
I talked to Ida Auken, the woman who wrote that original essay.
Wow.
And I felt sympathy. She said it was only ever intended to be a thought experiment about what life would be like in 10 years' time if all products became services. And she said she wasn't even necessarily in favour of it herself. And in fact, she even wrote a disclaimer saying, I'm not even sure that I agree with this utopian idea.
But hang on just a second, Josh. I hope you never got the impression that I was condemning her. I'm condemning the fact that there are so many people latching on going, yes, that's a great idea.
Even so, Glenn's language about the Great Reset is intemperate. He calls it fascism and writes that it could, quote, finally snuff out the flame of liberty in America and indeed the entire world. The stakes have never been higher.
Because everyone has been pushed to the brink. The world has already started to go over the edge. What do desperate, hungry, frightened people do when they trust no one? So I am warning, like the Great Reset, look, this is the truth. This is what's happening.
Personally, I don't think the Great Reset is as frightening as Glenn's making out, despite the World Economic Forum's own, sometimes alarming sounding messaging, a mistake they acknowledged themselves in a promotional video in 2021.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. And that's why so many are calling for a Great Reset. A Great Reset? That sounds more like buzzword bingo masking some nefarious plan for world domination. Hands up, this kind of slogan hasn't gone down well. But all we really want to say is that we all have an opportunity to build a better world.
Ida also has some regrets of her own.
I'm not in love with that essay. And it's not the best thing I ever wrote, but it was a thought experiment and it was fun at that time. And I think I learned something too from the way it was too easy to weaponize that. And if you're a politician, maybe you should not pretend you're Asimov or any kind of sci-fi writer, you know, maybe just stick to the boring reports. And
I gotta say, the World Economic Forum aren't great with titles, because they came up with the title The Great Reset too, which if you're a conspiracy theorist, couldn't sound more terrifying.
yes, it does sound a little bit terrifying. It's a gift for them, yes, I agree. So was my title, apparently.
I wondered if Thierry, who co-authored the book The Great Reset, felt the same way. And maybe from his vantage point, up in the mountains, he and Klaus Schwab had lost track a little of how their messaging was coming across. A lot has been made about the title. People have said the title is kind of like a conspiracy theorist's nightmare. These elitists are going to reset everything. I mean, the Great Reset definitely doesn't play well for all demographics.
Well, I don't know. This is a question that is to be asked to the conspiracy people.
Looking back, you know, because it all became so huge, is there anything that you would do differently now?
No, if it gave rise to this crazy conspiracy theories, it's too bad. It was completely out of my control. People pick and choose where to direct anger in this world. It can be a book, it can be anything. So, no, I wouldn't change anything.
Not even the title?
Not even the title. I think the title was good.
Despite these seemingly intractable positions, I want to end the story with a moment that strikes me as strangely hopeful. If you recall, during my interview with Glenn Beck, he'd been talking angrily about Ida's essay.
They just have to tweak people. They just have to control people. And that seems to be almost codified in you will have nothing and you'll like it.
But then I told him that I'd spoken to Ida.
Wow.
She said it was only ever intended to be a thought experiment about what life would be like in 10 years' time if all products became services.
Sure. But hang on just a second, John. I hope you never got the impression that I was condemning her.
Glenn's abrupt change in tone after I'd reminded him that Ida was real and nuanced reminded me a lot of something that Ida had said to me.
I remember the first time I had a death threat from someone who had read my piece, and he said, "That is probably the most fascist thing I've ever read. Please go and kill yourself." And I answered him, you know, "Thank you for your email. That telling other people to kill themselves because you disagree is probably the most fascist thing I ever heard." And then he was like, "You're a real person. I'm so sorry. I thought you were like this puppet."
I think this happens a lot when a person takes the risk of engaging with their critics. When the cold anonymity of the internet is replaced by human connection, the rage can subside very quickly. Next time, in the final episode of Things Fell Apart, how a former actor and model burned by Hollywood and devastated by the death of his brother has become a leading culture warrior, fueling the flames of every story we tell this season.
Things Fell Apart is presented by John Ronson and produced by Sarah Shebia. Our Book of the Week, James and John by Chris Bryant, continues in 15 minutes. First on Radio 4, The Miners' Strike Return Journey. Personal memories 40 years on.
Bitter and divisive, the miners' strike of the 1980s played out over a whole year, following the announcement in March 1984 that 20 pits would close with the loss of 20,000 jobs.
As the weeks went on, you knew this was a battle between the Union and Margaret Thatcher, and neither was going to give in.
Thousands of miners downed tools. In mining communities across the UK, women protested alongside husbands, fathers, brothers and sons. Within days they were arranging food parcels and soup kitchens, but many moved on to organising large rallies and fundraising events, public speaking and picketing.
It wasn't a matter of I'm standing behind my man, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with him.
I'm Chris Jackson, and I started my broadcast career covering the miners' strike in South Wales. 40 years on, I'm meeting people who lived through the strike and had direct experience of it. And in this episode, I've returned to South Wales to meet Anne Jones, whose husband John worked at Tower Colliery in the Welsh Valleys, and he was on strike for the full year. They lived, and still do, in one of the local pit villages, which was the backdrop for Anne's experiences during the strike.
This is Tower Road, and you go up there, across the bridge, and you're up on the drift, and then you walk across the field, and you're up to the pit. There was a tram line. If you look back up towards my garden, that's where the tram line bringing the coal went, so the whole thing was connected up to the pits.
Life was tough for families of striking miners without wages. There was no national mechanism for financial help from the miners' union, the NUM, with each area depending on any available local union funds. Anne says,